set the stage for our discussion of plans for Iraq, I'd like to give you a little historical background. First, I'd like to read a few excerpts from a speech I gave to an anti-war rally on February 15, 2003, a month before the Iraq War started. Saddam Hussein is a bad guy. He's a bad guy now. He was a bad guy in 1990 when April Glaspie of the State Department gave him the green light to invade Kuwait. He was a bad guy in the 1980s when Donald Rumsfeld sat down with him for a chat while he was supposedly gassing the Kurds. He was a bad guy in 1977 when Zbigniew Brzezinski met with him and proposed the invasion of Iran. And he was a bad guy in the 1960s when the CIA hired him to assassinate Iraqi leader Abdel Karim Qasim and then helped Saddam take over Iraq. He's always been a bad guy, but he was always our bad guy. Right up to 1990, official Department of Defense documents praised Saddam for vastly improving the education, medical care, and standard of living of his people, along with women's rights and religious freedom. His regime was called one of the most enlightened governments, progressive governments in the region. And it was. But there was a problem. The Berlin Wall had come down, the Soviet Union had collapsed, and the first Bush White House had to find another bad guy fast to justify the defense budget. And they did. Saddam Hussein. I've seen the white paper came out of the White House in which they selected Saddam as the most likely candidate for the new bad guy. They suckered him into attacking Kuwait, and the first Gulf War was on. Well, now the second President Bush wants his Gulf War too. Planning for it started long before 9/11, even before he became president. In September 1990, his advisors, Wolfowitz, Libby, Pearl, Jeb Bush, his brother, you know the characters, they set regime change in Iraq as a primary objective of U.S. foreign policy should Bush become president. But they made it clear that the purpose of moving against Iraq had nothing to do with Saddam personally. They said, whether Saddam's there or not, we need to occupy Iraq permanently in order to be able to dominate Iran, Syria, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, the southern Russian republics, and of course, the $10 trillion worth of oil and gas in the region. But there are problems with starting a preemptive war. It would be immoral. It would be costly in terms of American lives and in dollars. Hasn't that turned out to be true? It would require us to keep troops in Iraq indefinitely. It would come between us and our allies. It would incense the Arab world. It would provide Osama bin Laden with thousands of new recruits. It would therefore cause an enormous increase in the terrorist threat, destroy our national security, and further endanger the American people. As a combat veteran, I will not stand idly by and watch our security destroyed by a president who went AWOL rather than fight in Vietnam. When I joined the Air Force, I swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that includes a renegade president. If this war happens, I will call for the impeachment of George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, and the whole oil mafia. We are the people, we are sovereign, the whole world is with us, and we say no, this war would be treason. God bless America, and God save us from George W. Bush. That was February 15, 2003. A month later, troops were massed in Kuwait, but shock and awe hadn't yet started. This is just a little of what I said on March 15, 2003, on the eve of the war. Let me read you a couple of quotes. This war is a defensive war. It was forced upon us by our enemies who wished to destroy our nation. The only thing we cannot afford to lose in this war is our freedom, the foundation of our life and our future. No one has the right to complain about limitations on his personal freedom caused by the war, unquote. Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's propaganda minister, 1943. I'll skip to the last one. Quote, beware the leader who bangs the drums of war in order to whip the citizenry into a patriotic fervor. The citizenry, infused by fear and blinded by patriotism, will offer up all of their rights unto the leader. How do I know? This is what I have done, unquote. Julius Caesar. Now, I've been severely criticized for speaking out in opposition to this coming war. We're told that we're aiding and abetting the enemy. We're told that we should support the president no matter what. Well, I say, hogwash. I feel an affinity for the troops deployed in Kuwait. They're my comrades in arms. But the truth is, they're not over there protecting our freedoms. Our freedoms are not under attack by Saddam Hussein. Our freedoms are under attack by John Ashcroft. They're threatened by John Poindexter. They're trampled by Donald Rumsfeld. They are disdained by Dick Cheney. And they are not even understood by George W. The troops surrounding Iraq are not protecting us. We are protecting them and their honor and their freedoms by speaking truth to power. And here is the truth that we proclaim. This coming war has nothing to do with national security or freedom or democracy or human rights or protecting our allies or weapons of mass destruction or defeating terrorism or disarming Iraq. It has to do with money, it has to do with oil, and it has to do with raw imperial power, and it is wrong. Preemptive war is immoral, illegal, unconstitutional, a war crime against the people of Iraq, and treason against the United States of America. And again, I call for their impeachment. Now that was March 15, 2003, on the eve of the Iraq War. Now the point of this bit of history is that we in the peace movement knew better. We knew what this war would do to our country. We knew what it would do to our reputation in the world. We knew what it would do to the safety of our people. We weren't taken in by the doctored and manipulated intelligence and the outright falsehoods we were told to justify this war. One more little bit of history. I'd like to quote briefly from the memoirs of the first President Bush, written before his son got the job. Quote, trying to eliminate Saddam would have incurred incalculable human and political costs. Apprehending him was probably impossible. We would have been forced to occupy Baghdad and, in effect, rule Iraq. There was no viable exit strategy we could see. Had we gone the invasion route, the United States could conceivably still be an occupying power in a bitterly hostile land, unquote. My sisters and brothers, it's just too darn bad his son can't read. Of course, he can't read. He reads the teleprompter very well. I wish I had one. Now here we are, 4 years, and well over 3,400 American lives later. It is also hundreds of thousands of Iraqi civilian lives and hundreds of billions of American dollars later. This misguided war has cost more American lives than 9/11 and has dragged on longer than World War II. we still have no accountability for how this war started. We know most of you lily-livered members of Congress from both parties abdicated your constitutional responsibility to declare war or not, and gave a blank check to the imperial presidency. We also know you were lied to by George W. Bush and his people. What I can't understand is how you believe those lies. Are the members of Congress that much more stupid than we in the peace movement? Or did you really know that you were just being lapdogs for the fat cats as usual? Well, those of us opposing the war went from a tiny minority of the American people to a large majority. Donald Rumsfeld was long gone. Democrats took control of Congress. And yet, for months and months and months, you still failed to call President Bush accountable for his lies. What on earth was wrong with you? You know, it's a hackneyed expression. I know you've heard it many times, but it's true. Clinton lied. Nobody died. If it was okay to impeach Bill Clinton for fibbing about an event which only embarrassed his family and soiled the blue dress, what took you so long to impeach Cheney and Bush for deceiving us into a war costing so many thousands of lives? If it was right for Richard Nixon to have to resign under threat of impeachment for covering up an attempt to peek at the other party's plans, why was it not right for you immediately to get rid of all those responsible not only for the two deadly wars of aggression, but also for the loss of habeas corpus, spying on American citizens, torturing suspects in the phony war on terror, saddling our grandchildren with trillions in debt, giving away our sovereignty with the North American Union, and subverting the Constitution itself? Where is the accountability? Much changed while George W. Bush was in office. Nearly 3,000 died on 9/11. Many more than that died in his wars of aggression, occupations. There are more than 24,000 wounded soldiers whose lives will never be the same. There are tens of thousands of young men and women with serious psychological problems because of what they have seen and what they have done. There are hundreds of thousands poisoned by depleted uranium who will suffer lives of pain and disability, and who will father thousands of children with severe birth defects. Our military services are depleted, demoralized. VA is still severely underfunded. The National Guard and Reserves have been subjected to tour after tour, disrupting lives for even the lucky ones who return unscathed. Jobs have been lost. Marriages have been destroyed. Homes have been foreclosed. Children have been estranged. And natural disasters like Katrina have been undealt with. And still, there was no accountability. In Iraq, religious liberty was lost. Mosques, churches, and synagogues, which thrived under Saddam, have been destroyed. Women have lost their freedom. Essential services have been disrupted. People have been tortured. Cities like Fallujah lie in ruins. And in spite of heroic efforts by the vast majority of our young men and women in uniform, the remaining Iraqis are worse off today than they were before we liberated As a result, our reputation in the world has suffered, and we are the understandable target of hatred throughout the Arab and Muslim nations. More than 4 years of war have destroyed Iraq, destroyed our standing in the world, destroyed our national security, destroyed our civil liberties, destroyed precious lives, and brought our nation to the brink of financial disaster. And it was all predictable, because we in fact predicted it. But did Bush or Cheney apologize? Did the members of his rubber stamp Congress apologize? Have more than a few of you admitted that you were wrong and we in the peace movement were right? Of course not. The hundreds of billions of dollars spent on this war have not just vanished after all. They have gone to Condoleezza Rice's ExxonMobil, and Dick Cheney's Halliburton, and George Bush's Carlyle Group, and then through their lobbyists into the pockets of you congressional incumbents. Perhaps that's why there has been no accountability. But no longer. The American people have waited long enough. From all across the political spectrum, they finally got together and demanded accountability. They demanded a government which follows the Constitution, honors the truth, and serves the people. And in response, I have told them, never cast a vote for anyone who takes any money from corporations or their lobbyists. None of them. On behalf of the government of the United States, I'd like to apologize to our men and women in the armed forces and their families, to the people of Iraq, to our allies, and to all the world's people. Undoing the damage done by our war against Iraq will be impossible. We'll do what we can. We'll use our money to help the Iraqis rebuild their country, their infrastructure, their society. But we can't do it as an occupying power. I'm asking the United Nations to send peacekeepers to Iraq. But whether or not they do, we will leave within 3 months. We are going to support what's left of our troops by bringing them home while they're still alive. Terrorism is a real threat. In the short term, we must protect the American people from the terrorists our misguided policies have already created. This means enhancing port security, beefing up cockpit doors, strengthening the Border Patrol and Coast Guard. We'll do these things. But in the long term,